Hey, how are you, Jerry? Yeah, but she's here now. Wow.
Well, they gave me the book. Did you try that one?
No, we got away.
Let's go ahead and get started, because Alison also sings in the choir. And everybody, let's please listen to this. Today, we're celebrating Mark Wingfield's 15th anniversary here.
Yes.
Is Ray on?
He was a greeter too, so
Okay,
you see him
okay.
somewhere.
He'll join us there. Okay, so, a few announcements before we get going, and see if you'll turn it back to me about 20 till. That clock, if we think is right, we got a new battery for Christmas.
Okay.
We were all late for church before Christmas. The clock just wouldn't move. So, anyway, okay, want to do just a few quick announcements and turn this over to Alison. I am going to pass around the prayer request and the birthday list on this particular one, so take that and pass it. Just a couple of things. They're coming up. There is an all-church conference today. Lunch is free if anybody wants to stay. That is right after church. It'll be a community hall. There's a Super Bowl of Caring, as you can see on the back of your order of worship, that's coming up. And I believe, unless there's anybody else who has a large announcement, let's go ahead and get started with the lesson then. Anyone else have anything? It's all yours.
Oh, goodness.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry, there is one more thing. Leanna and Aaron Coyle Carr, not Car Coyle, are having a shower. And it's going to be on Saturday, February 2nd, 10 to 11:30 in the church parlor. Registry is at babylist.com/babycoilcar. So I'm going to pass this around for you to look at as well. Okay, thank you, Alison. We appreciate you teaching us.
Why don't we go ahead and start in prayer first?
Yes.
Go from there. God, we thank you for your presence here today. As we parse and talk and discuss, we pray that your spirit would be evident and help us to see something new that perhaps we have never seen before in these scriptures, and that we can apply to ourselves and to your kingdom. Amen. Okay, so Lost and Found. It's the title of this, right? And our passages today have one parable in common, but it's used in a different context. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in and read for you Matthew 18. And then I'm actually going to skip to verse 10 if you all don't mind. And then we will look at Luke, and if several of you be prepared to read that, I appreciate it. So Matthew chapter 18, the parable of the lost sheep, starting with verse 10. Take care that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you, in heaven their angels continually see the face of my Father in heaven. What do you think? If a shepherd has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of your Father in heaven that one of these little ones should be lost. Keep that in your brain. And can John teach preschool? I'm going to keep that in your brain. And remember. And now let's go to Luke 15, 1 through 10. We're going to look at two parables together on that. If somebody would read 15 verses 1 through 10. Luke chapter 15, excuse me.
Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. The Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners, eats with them." So he told them this parable. Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying that it rejoiced with him, for I found my sheep that was lost. And if so, I tell you, There will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. For what woman having 10 silver coins, if she loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I found the coin that I had lost." Just so, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents.
Okay.
Is the money handled along the way for this thing lost? Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Who stole the pen out of the
I got
prayer
it.
thing? Here you go.
Kind of need that for
Thank you.
prayer requests,
Yeah,
don't
I
we?
wonder why they can't go fast.
All right. Okay, I'd like the meat to be as we get into, of course, the third parable, but let's look at Matthew and Luke and look at the differences and similarities between the two. What are the similarities between the Matthew passage and the Luke passage?
Math works in both of them.
Yeah. Very good. So same sheep, right? One sheep
Verses 99.
versus 99, good. Okay. What else? What's similar?
We go looking for the lost one.
Yeah.
And they rejoice when they find them.
Okay, now what about that Matthew passage? What's the difference between Matthew and Luke? Does it say anything about a party or rejoicing?
Oh, yes.
Well, there's just one person rejoicing in that.
Which is the shepherd, right. So Matthew, but he doesn't have a party, or at least it's not mentioned there.
Or put it on his shoulders.
Right, exactly. So we have a little more detail in the Luke, correct?
You have more context than Luke did.
Correct. Well, it's different. What's interesting is we have a different context in Luke versus Matthew. So, something to keep in mind. Shepherd plus, right? Okay. What about, oh, where am I? Okay. In Matthew, and we skipped these verses, I apologize, but I'm trying to make sure we have time. Matthew's verses follows the verses about being a millstone or a stumbling block and a request for kingdom of heaven status. It's a totally different context than Luke follows. It shows the tax collectors and the sinners coming near. So if you look in Luke chapter 15, 1 and 2, the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So they were grumbling about what Jesus does, and this is Jesus' response to them. So Matthew chooses to use this parable in a different way than Luke does, right? Parables. And speaking of, Matthew has one parable, right? Luke uses 3 in a row. So don't want to belabor that point, but just to keep in mind, this is where we're coming from. So one of the notes in the commentary said Matthew's whole deal is he wants to focus on the Christian community and life together. Whereas Luke, and Matthew ties the little ones, children, with sheep, and little ones verses 14 who are lost, perhaps maybe Christians who have strayed. But Luke is a different animal, right? Okay, let's go to Luke 15 verses 1 through 10 and just throw some stuff out here. Why were the Pharisees so upset?
He was eating with low lives.
Perceived low lives.
Perceived low lives, And what was the point Jesus was trying to make with the first 2 parables?
That's where he should be spending his time.
Yeah. Okay. What are some themes and messages you hear in the text? What themes link the 2 parables in Luke? What themes link the 2 parables in Luke? The sheep and the coins.
Whole lot of searching,
What?
whole lot of searching.
Searching, good.
Joy that comes from redemption.
Joy. Yeah. What else? What, you have basic stuff. Lost. Found. Not rocket science, y'all, come on.
Importance of the individual.
Importance of the individual. The one, right? Sorry for the squeaking. I'm gonna just put one, don't mind. Goodness.
The presence of someone who's searching, someone who's, you know, I think that's right. I don't know what I mean by that.
So, perhaps the owner, is that what you're getting at? So in other words, there was an owner who realized that something was lost? Am I putting words in your mouth?
I'm trying to equate in this case the woman having caring about her plants to the Lord caring about lost people and soul.
Mhm.
The owner isn't it? In my case, it's the owner.
So you could owner, and we're gonna talk about that some more too, realizes something is lost. I read something this week, sort of blew my mind on these parables, but I'll throw the bomb in later. Okay. Okay, I have to rethink this whole thing, but I didn't rethink the whole thing. I'm just gonna throw it to you and let you read it later. So who is the focus of these parables? Perhaps. So we have one for the lost. I would argue the finder, which we've always kind of focused on the lost one, correct? But if you look at the parables, the focus really is on the searching and the finding and the rejoicing, which is really more the owner person searching. So that kind of turns things around a little bit, I think, too.
We're getting back to the point, guys, Christ searching. Was he having dinner with these people who were sinners?
Yes,
He
yes.
searched because he's searching.
Because that, and where Luke is coming from, absolutely, that's the focus there, right? Let me throw one other thing at you. Who is at fault for the lost items? Never thought about this before personally.
No one, stuff happened.
Yes, yes. I like your thinking, very good.
It's the nature of life, yeah.
It is, things get
Things
lost.
get lost.
Okay,
Well, you
good.
could say the shepherd did, because they weren't. he wasn't.
Sure, blame it on the ship.
That's right.
She's answering the question,
By
yes.
nature, aren't sheep very stubborn and don't necessarily, that's why they need dogs and shepherds to keep them together. So
Exactly.
it's the nature of the thing
beast,
that is
so to
prone to
speak.
being lost that,
Kind of like us.
yes.
Not the nature.
But then,
Well,
then if you're a shepherd, you know that's the nature of the sheep, so then your job is to make sure it doesn't happen.
But when you have 100,
I love throwing bombshells out.
And they
it's like
did
if
have-
you were the only teacher on a field trip with 100 kids,
No
really?
kidding.
But you are still responsible for those 100 kids, aren't you? Way back in the back, too.
Well, I was just gonna agree with Diana that yeah, I mean, it's the nature of children to wander away, even though you as I've never been a parent, but you as the, supervisor or parent or teacher or whatever, or librarian, I mean, yeah, kids just get, they
Kids
just
do.
wander off, and the sheep just took it into his mind to wander off.
Right, as sheep do. What about the coin?
Coin doesn't work that way.
Oh, no, Jesus threw us a little
He
key,
loses
didn't
it.
he?
And Christ didn't really, in a sense, lose these sinners either. They kind of just wandered off themselves. The coin parable doesn't really fit the other two very well.
Isn't that interesting? And the coin parable, notice what she says. I've lost it here. Could somebody read what,
I have found a coin which I had lost.
which I had lost. So she's accepting responsibility for having lost that coin, but she also realized she had lost the coin and moved heaven and earth, if you will, to find it. So,
What is it where it says, you know, if I had lost something, I want all the light I could find turned on, you know, and it says she did not like the light.
I never noticed that
Well,
before.
no, it
Did
says
you?
Does she not?
Does
So
not.
she's
Does not-
meaning that
Does
she
not,
does.
yes.
Yeah.
It's a like Jeopardy
Does
question.
not
She
like-
Double
reverses
negative.
it. Yeah, she's just saying, of course I'm gonna look for it. So, yeah.
She does not like it.
So, the structure of the first two parables, they start with a question. There's a story of losing and finding. There's a celebration with friends. And then we have the moral at the end. So, where's the emphasis placed in the first two parables? Of the lost and found or the celebration?
Oh, the lost and found, I would say.
So we have one for lost and found. Is the emphasis more on the losing and finding end of it or the celebration of it? Of finding?
I think it's equal.
It does seem
Kind of equal?
to me.
Okay, good. We'll just say equal.
Judah, do you have a question? Judah?
Well, I'm back on the previous one, who's to blame? And I'm also thinking of the third parable in Luke.
Yes, which we're about to get to, absolutely.
Well, I mean,
Go
I
ahead.
think he's preaching to the Pharisees. I think he's the one he's blaming them for losing it.
Interesting, okay.
That's me though.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of commentators. So it's particularly Luke is using this to emphasize
Yeah,
the against the Pharisees. And, we'll talk about that some more in a minute, absolutely. Okay, a couple asides. The lost coin parable is only found in Luke, and which is interesting. And another note: the drachma that she lost was a silver coin worth a denarius or a day's wage. So 10 drachmas was significant, but not really a huge sum of money. Because clearly this woman had some money. She threw out the doors and said, "Let's come celebrate. I lost a coin. You know, I found a lost coin. Let's celebrate." So, what do you think was the point? Any thoughts
The
on that?
point of what?
What do you think was the point of this particular parable? It's one of those we just sort of throw away. We don't think about it much.
I think, so when I was in school, I lost a flash drive that had all of my, like, multiple semesters worth of work on it.
Oh my.
And,
Oh
like, I went tearing through everything. I went home, I went up to work, couldn't find it, and ended up it had fallen through a hole in my purse, and so it was between the lining and the actual outside the purse. Anyway,
Yes.
but after that happened, I was like, I was thinking of this parable exactly, because I was searching high and low, and then it made me think, like, how invested I was in finding that, but then how invested am I in rescuing people who are lost, or reaching out and finding people who are on the fringes, like the sheep was or the coin was. So this is an example of an everyday thing that people value a lot. And you say, if you value this piece of money that much, are people that much more
Nice.
valuable? Because we can relate to money, right? But then people are so much more important than money or a flash drive or anything like that, you know, so.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Where do I want to go? Sorry.
Alison,
Yes, ma'am.
you said something earlier about celebrating.
Yes.
And yes, there's a lot here about celebrating for everyone who is lost and found. I just have a little bit of a concern. I guess most of our celebration is in ritual. You know, we baptize and we rejoice. You're the salt and you're the light. But my grandmother, when I was saved and was baptized, gave me a little metal fish. And I kept that all these years. I don't know how much it means to people to use a symbol or something besides, something that they actually can see and do and feel and know about from another.
From that very day, that's the key, from that
Right.
very, yes.
And from one person. That is all, it doesn't need to be the pastor.
Sure.
You know, but there needs to be something that this church or any church would recognize someone who's been lost and now found.
Good, good observations. An aside here, that Luke uses the rule of three. And the reason I'm saying this is because we're getting ready to read the third parable. And the rule of three is kind of, you use similar items and the third one kind of turns on it a little bit, has a little bit different outcome. Or the story gets a little bit changed, like the 3 pigs. What happens the first one? Right? You huff and you puff and the house blows down. Second one, same thing, right? Third one, what happens? You have some puffs. The house doesn't blow down. So just, I read that and I went, I never thought about that before. So I thought that was an interesting way to look at this. And also, parable of the Good Samaritan, same thing.
Oh, yeah. The third person. it came
Third
out.
person, it changes a little bit. So this third parable, Jesus is showing us a few different things. So the other two inform it, but the third one changes things up a little bit, I think. So we'll see what you all think. Who would like to read the parable of the prodigal and his brother, as it says? That's Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11.
Then Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to the father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his field to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they begin to celebrate. All the way to
Oh, look,
16.
yeah, thank you.
Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he got him back safe and sound. Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who had devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." Then the father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and has been found."
Questions or comments?
This one has jealousy, that's not any the other one.
Good, yeah. Yeah.
Because it has people like
It has people in it, yes. Good, yes.
Sheep don't get jealous.
Sheep are jealous.
Any other observations?
Don't you think that the father was probably hurt by the older son's reaction as well? I mean, the father, was hurt when the younger son went away, but he's rejoicing, and yet he probably feels pain from the older son's reaction.
Which brings another question to mind, which is one of the things I was reading this week that I then thought about. Who was lost in this parable?
Well, it depends on how you define the word lost.
Okay,
The one son that left obviously was lost, because they know where it was, they know what's going on.
right.
However, the older son, you have to be seeing some indications of this kind of behavior in that kid initially, or that could be, you should say, I guess. So when the younger son came back and the older son reacted the way he did, the older son portrayed himself as like, I could be lost. Maybe you are.
Mhm. And who did the father go after? The older one. That's where we have a little twist. We have the lost and found, the son's gone away. Father didn't go look for that son, right?
Right, he came back to his own
He
volition.
came back, father rejoiced, but then in the middle of the rejoicing, it appears, perhaps he realized somebody's missing from this celebration. And he goes and looks for the other son. Isn't that interesting?
When thinking about it after hearing George's sermon this morning, I don't
Yes.
spoil it for anybody, but just the mentality of the sons is like a mentality of scarcity. Like for the younger son, there's not enough here for me. I need to go out and see what else is out in the world. And then he realized what he had, that was enough. And then the older son is looking and going, thinking that the father doesn't have enough to give, that he wouldn't have enough love to give both of them,
Yes.
So,
Well, and there's resentment, obviously, because the younger son went off and just totally blew the inheritance. Which, the other interesting thing is, traditionally, inheritance, usually the older son gets, what, is it 2/3? So, and if you read it carefully, it says he divided it in half. Whoa. So that's kind of interesting too. There's lots of stuff going on.
One thing that jumped out at me that I never thought about before, and I think we're all guilty of it, and that's just being taken for granted.
Yes.
We take our spouse, we take our kids, they don't give us any trouble, we just take it for granted, that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that's what the father did to the older son, at least that's what the son thought.
That's what it, well, and that's what it seems like too.
Yeah.
I mean, we can relate, I think, to the father
Yeah,
as well as the older son.
yeah, because when he went to get him, I don't know that he went out there to say, hey, you're my super son, I think he went out there to read him the right out, you gotta get in there to the party.
Nice. Yeah. Why aren't you celebrating?
Right, why aren't you in there?
But it was possible for the older son to have matured enough to be of the maturity level of his father. And it's possible for him to have taken as much joy in his brother's return as the father did.
Absolutely.
It's possible.
Yeah.
If he were really, really, you would say, grown up. And he didn't.
It may cross his mind that now, okay, my younger brother's died. What's left of the inheritance? Is it gonna be split again?
Oh, that's true.
You could see that, yeah, absolutely, you can see that. So let's sketch back to the, what we call the prodigal, the younger son. Was he sincere?
When he came,
We don't know.
I hear both, no, we don't know.
he was kind of desperate. He was starving.
He was desperate. That doesn't make him sincere, but he was desperate,
Desperate.
yeah.
Well, you get very sincere when you're desperate.
I was thinking the same thing, Mike.
When you're desperate, you get some sincerity.
It was interesting, I read, if you notice, where is it, in verse 18, he plans ahead what he's going to say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the part that's really,
That's the one I kind of go,
I have an idea, yeah.
And it could be sincere, I'm not trying, it definitely can be sincere.
But the fact that he hit rock bottom, I think makes me think he was, I mean, he was planning because I think he was embarrassed about what is he gonna say to come back. He probably planned on never seeing his father again.
Sure.
I'm taking off, I'm going to another country.
I think the point of it is he's seeking forgiveness.
Good,
And he's willing to eat crow.
yes,
I mean,
that's huge, isn't it?
Sorry, I didn't, what did you say, Judith?
Willing to eat crow, she said.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
willing to- yeah.
And
Yeah.
corn
I
husk.
think he did. I think he came back more rebel than all of that attention that his dad threw for him. I think he's an opportunist.
Because he knew he was gonna do that.
He didn't know opportunity was not.
Doesn't say that's not right
He
by
could
my
have gone the
brother.
other way.
Yeah.
He could have completely said, get away from me, I don't know you, you left. Of course, that would have ended the whole thing right there.
And it is a parable, remember, not an allegory, it is a parable.
There you go.
So that means we can read into it what works, not what works, what challenges us, I
The
should
younger
say.
son did not let his pride stand in the way. Now, he had to get desperate before he did that, but some people don't, I mean,
That's-
the pride stands before everything. They will do
And
that,
thus, they stay lost.
Even when they
Right.
know they're wrong.
But if it's genuine.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and we don't know for sure, but we know what the father did. It was genuine, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did the right thing regardless of whether his son was genuine or not. He set the right example.
What about at the beginning of the story? If you were the father, would you have allowed the son to do what he did?
what else could you do?
What if you don't give
Tell
him
no.
the inheritance? If he hadn't given him half of the inheritance, he could have said no.
Wouldn't you have had a real heart-to-heart with this kid? I mean, sat down with him and said, "No, you really sure you want to do this? What have you mapped out? What kind of a plan do you have for this?"
Exactly, exactly,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know if it's the popular answer, but I don't think I'd have any trouble saying no to that.
Me either.
Yeah.
You're rewarding poor behavior.
But since he's already old enough to get around and go do things, so his father's had 16 years with him, I don't know how many, 20 years with this boy. Must know his character by now, whatever that is. I'm assuming he made a decision based, it was thought through and based on thinking, well, either this boy is responsible and he can handle it, or he's not, and he needs to be taught that he needs to learn from this, how you say it, learn the hard way.
Yeah, learn the hard way, and that could be very well what he had chosen to do.
But the boy is rejecting his father.
Yes.
And the father is saying, so be it.
Ah, okay.
What was rejecting his father?
And the father saying, so be it, is what she said, yeah.
If the father had said no, we would not have a parable. I'll just say,
There he is that, there he is that, yes,
Well said.
yes.
Yes, this could have been the third time. This time it was yes, and so.
Oh,
I think it's interesting that the one son had other son that stayed said, but you never even gave me a goat to have a party. So wouldn't you have thought if one child leaves, would you reevaluate your relationship with the other child to maybe hope that it would be a healthier relationship? And it, you know, I don't know, that just kind of strikes me as maybe a little cold.
That makes a good soap opera, but this is a parody.
Well, it's back to the taking for granted, the son doesn't give me any problems,
Yeah.
so perhaps taking for granted a little bit, okay.
But there's a history here too. I mean, if you're really subjecting yourself to all of this, there's a history. And maybe the father's tried all that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if I'm supposed to look at this and think this is a good father, I don't. I don't think he should have split the money, I don't think he should have let the son go off and waste it, and I don't think he should have done the fatted calf and the big celebration when the kid comes back. So this parable always bothered me because I thought, well, am I supposed to think God is like that? Because I don't think that's a good father.
Yes, because God is the father in this story.
Yeah,
God gave us free
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
yep.
He let us go off and commit murder and whatever else you can think of. And when we come back to him, he brings us back. And the parable is told to the Pharisees who are complaining about Jesus accepting sinners. And the elder son is the Pharisees, the religious people who have this dry, I follow the law and God rewards me.
But more than rewards. In this parable, the son who
But
behaves
To
poorly.
the Pharisees, you don't get a second chance.
To the Pharisees, you're saying, okay,
The Pharisees don't think you get a second chance.
okay.
President Bright quoted a fellow that was in bad shape, an old man, and he said, he said, we want justice for the other fellow, but we want mercy for ourselves. This was an old guy that was about ready to go, and I guess we all feel a little that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And aren't all parables to be seen from a spiritual nature, not from a physical nature? And that's what we get confused about, I think. But, I mean, all of them have a spiritual point.
You know, Alice, that as I listen to different people's opinion, and I can see sometimes we are number one sin, and sometimes we're number two.
You need to make that delineation.
That's a life.
Yeah.
That to you, sometimes you, and just some of us also, we go to church every Sunday, we give to church, we do lots in the church. We should entitle God's grace a little bit more than we give to other guy. Because that's how we feel that way.
It's human nature.
But in other times, we feel like we need how badly, we need God's grace, God's forgiveness in our life. And sometimes that's how that is in life. For all your life, you have in and out of God's grace. Sometimes you feel like God has been forgive you, and you feel like God's grace will love you. But sometimes you feel like God just leave me alone, didn't do anything for me in my life.
The eternal conundrum.
You know what I mean?
I do.
That's how that,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what Robert's saying to me is what the difference, or what distinguishes God from, one of the things that distinguishes God from us, when he forgives us, he forgets. The Father didn't say, man, you have been there, you're grounded, you're my lowest servant, whatever, because he completely forgot what the transgression was and gave him his love, and forgot what he did. And I think that's what God does for us. When we sin, whatever, we ask for forgiveness, and God is able to keep a relationship with us and forgets that and moves on.
Well, because so often too, we suffer the earthly consequences of our own errors, and God doesn't have to pile, put salt on the wound either. like we sometimes want to do to other people.
Yes, yes, which brings me to another point, and this is part of what turned it on its head for a little bit for me, is I read, and I would recommend this, her last name is Levine, Levine. She's a Jewish scholar who's written a book about the parables.
Amy.
Yes, Amy
Yes.
Levine, thank you.
Yeah.
She, and you will find yourself arguing with her as you're reading it, because she turns a lot of stuff on its head, including saying that God is not the owner or the father or the woman with the lost coins. And my question to you is, and I mean, I'm not gonna go into all of that, except to say, who, instead of relating to the older son or the younger son, let's put ourselves in the place of the father for a little bit. And say, okay, who in our circle is lost? And who are we looking for to bring in? Who have we let get off by the margins, if you will? And like the woman, have we, do we realize the significance and say, and spend the time and the effort to bring that person, that coin, back where it belongs? What do you think of that? Looking at it from a different perspective.
So who's she saying we should be? Or
Well, I'm
consider?
just saying, think about, she's saying that it's just another person in the parable, and that Luke is kind of giving the Pharisees a run for their money here, and blaming the older son, putting all this on. So like I said, I'm not gonna I didn't want to do the whole thing, but I wanted you to think about taking, instead of, we always say the father, God is the father, and she gives the father some blame, just like we talked about, and said, no, you can't say, because the shepherd lost a sheep, the woman lost the coin, and they are to blame, and we can't blame God for these things. So it's very interesting. It blew my mind a bit. And I was like, okay, I don't think I can even bring this to them, but just a little bit, just to think about it in a different perspective. So my question is, who do you relate to most in this parable? Is one question. The other is, if you put yourself in the place of your father, how does that change how you think about this parable?
How many times have we had situations because of our own self-interest that we felt, but we could have helped somebody, but it serves our purpose in terms of our worldly being, that we choose to accept that because it fits our need, not the person who needs to be saved.
Thank you. Good insight. Anybody else?
So it's been interesting to hear everybody's different opinion on the father, the older son. Some people think the older father was a good father, others bad, and some people think the older son was jealous of his anyways. And then I think this chapter of the parable was written that way with ambiguity, so because the point being that regardless of which way it is in life, if it is that the old man wasn't a good father, whatever it is, still the case lies, just like in all these cases, that we need to celebrate the return of the lost sheep, coin, son, whatever. The rest of it's kind of insignificant compared to that.
Oh, thank you. That's good. Very good insight. I love it. You all can teach this whole class for me. It's just like, there's something else. There it is.
Allison, sometimes I think about some of the folks that left the church, in the last couple of years. I don't think of them as lost in terms of their, sinners, whatever. They're just we had broken fellowship. I would want some of that to be healed over time, and it may take years. I don't know. So, but I think about that.
Yeah. Good.
A weird thought about perspective comes to mind because I thought about this as we were reading about coin. It's hard for me to identify with Well, kind of different direction. What if I were, the lamp? Or what if I were the broom? What if I were an instrument that enables the lost to find? Or alternatively, what if I am part of the wilderness that makes it hard for the sheep to find its way back to the shepherd?
Wow.
Right? Let's take the inanimate objects that are either barriers, hindrances or helps
Yes.
here, because it might not be my story. I might not get to a starring part as the father or the lost one or whatever, but I might be somewhere in the cast, helping them along or, finding myself in the way.
I love that. Wow, I never thought of it that way. That's awesome. That's, woo. Wow. I don't know if we can go beyond that one. That was awesome.
I'll bet we'll push through it.
And I need to push through here in a few minutes because I'll have to go to choir. So, couple things. The big question, this parable does not finish the story, does it? We don't know what happens. We don't know if the older son goes in or not. So, Henry Nouwen had some thoughts on the older son. Said, resentment and gratitude cannot coexist, since resentment blocks the perception and experience of life as a gift. My resentment tells me that I don't receive what I deserve, and it always manifests itself in envy. So if the elder brother perhaps did not get over his resentment,
Yeah.
he might not have gone in, which would be really sad. So, thoughts on and relating to the younger or the prodigal. Again, this is from Henry Nouwen, and I would strongly recommend, here's another good reading, is The Return of the Prodigal Son, A Story of Homecoming. It's a lovely, lovely book. And he says, the more we become sensitive to our own journey, the more we realize that we are leaving and coming back. Like you said, sometimes we're the young son, sometimes we're the older. We are leaving and coming back every day, every hour. Our minds wander away, but eventually return. Our hearts leave in search of affection and return, sometimes broken. Our bodies get carried away in their desires, then sooner or later return. It's never one dramatic life moment, but a constant series of departures and returns. So we need to remember that for ourselves and for others. Henry Nouwen, Home Tonight. This is actually further reflections on the parable of the prodigal son. He has a lot of good things to say about this parable. But I like also what a lot of you have said, and that is, let's remember to celebrate the times when we all come back. So, thank you all.
Thank you.
This is great. Love it.
How you doing?
Good. Congratulations, Mark. Wonderful, wonderful to have Mark 15 years. Okay, we set a record today, with 32 people here, I think it's good hours.
Oh, yeah.
And McKenna, and I want you to meet Rachel Lane. She's talking to Carol here. Rachel's in the back. Rachel is our guest today as well. So with Rachel and McKenna, we had 32 people, and that's our new record. So, okay, all right. Let's go through prayer requests, and then we will be done. Okay. Well, you want to talk about some of those, Mike? About Ben? Yeah.
My son Ben still, his depression is horrible, came back. This time, just, keeps on coming back, so he just wants to end it all, seriously. And we've done everything we can to bring him back, and claims he's accepted Christ. When we were growing up, when he was growing up, he was my only child that did not accept Christ. At the time he was younger, he claims he has now. Yet he's expecting God to all of a sudden just show him the way, you know what I mean? You know how you think God's not, you were talking about that, Robert. God's not in your life, and when you think he's not there, you know he's really there. But just because when you see it, you think he's gone. Don't see it, you think he's gone. He doesn't see it. get it. Sometimes you have, it's 3 years later, you see it,
Right.
what was happening during that period. And, but he needs to see it right now, so.
Okay,
he's-
we'll pray for Ben.
Really bad,
Okay,
How old
this
is
this
he, Michael?
44.
That's Ben, we'll pray for Ben. Are there other prayer requests that didn't make it because people came in later or that we know of?
I've got a celebration we need to all have. Yesterday, as you know, Mark Wingfield has had complications from that surgery, and he had migraines and severe headaches. And they tried different things, didn't work, so they referred him to a doctor over at the medical school. Well, he called for an appointment, and he couldn't get one until July. And he took that appointment, but they called him, he was having a really bad day last week, and they called him and they had a cancellation, and he's going in next week.
This is Dave, you don't make
No, this is Mark Wingfield.
What are they gonna do to
Oh,
it?
yes.
Well, I don't know, he's
This
just
lady's,
desperate.
the lady, I've talked to him a little bit about it. This, so in the research, there's really not evidence documented that people don't recover with the blood patch that they've done for him. And he's had 5, and he's still having these headaches from the myelogram he had way back last year. But this particular physician at Southwestern is the one who's collecting the research on this particular phenomenon. And so she's primarily a researcher, which is why she's so hard to get an appointment with.
They're
But
using Botox on that now too.
yeah, his is, I think they may have even tried that, but I think
And he's doing a particular type of physical therapy.
it's kind of voodoo. But if it
It's
works, it's
yeah.
kind of voodoo. But if
Yeah.
it works, then it's
Okay. Nate, you
Yeah.
have,
Probably.
Nate, you have one
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, it's an update there on Ryan.
Ryan.
They said the surgery was successful, that he's home, but he's gonna start his radiation and his chemotherapy coming up, so.
Okay.
And continue to pray for my coworker Kristen. Her husband's still in the hospital. Unfortunately, her mom's come from New Orleans, so she's helping out a bit. But he's still pretty sick. And
Okay.
What's wrong?
he got pancreatitis, and it led to all
Sepsis.
these multiple complications with his heart and his kidneys and all that kind of things. He's 35, so not.
Dennis, it was a praise about the fact that he got an early appointment.
Yeah.
But we need to really pray that they find,
Something to
That
give
they
you
can
some
fix
relief.
it. Yeah.
that they can fix it.
Yes.
Because his life has got to be miserable at times when you have these headaches every day.
Okay.
And it's amazing, he's always got that cheerful.
Yep.
Okay.
And works at the pace.
I don't know if any of you watched the news last night, but they had several stories on several channels on Our Calling, this place that was helping that. Well, Heather and I went last night. We picked up a Salvation Army van, and we hauled about 12 people from Our Calling. We were there while they were doing the filming of that, and to some places, because Our Calling stops at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, except when it gets really cold. They fed them, and then they could either sleep on a concrete floor or go to a shelter. And some of them didn't want to because they were afraid they'd lose everything, so they didn't want to go to a shelter. So, but Heather and I hauled some last night, and it was pretty amazing. The people, these are, what would you call them? Unsheltered homeless, I guess. I mean, they're always living on the street.
They don't want to.
Yeah, they don't want to go into a shelter, and it's but they were the kindest people you ever meet. It's very impressive. Anyway,
Are they doing it tonight, is City Hall, or?
they do it at night. If anybody, Heather's going to be asking for volunteers. Several of us have volunteered to drive, but we need 2 of us at a time to go. One to navigate and one whatever. But anyway,
Emergency response.
there'll be more information on that, and there's more room in the inn. So room in the inn are for more people that are already in shelters who are coming, and the ladies that come here are really the ones who give the room in the inn because they're giving their beds up
They
to
give
come
up their
sleep
beds.
here. So anyway, that's what's happening. But anything else before we pray, and we'll go. Thank you for coming. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, a day that we can come and study your word and discuss it and try to understand your meanings and for us to be able to internalize those meanings. Father, we pray for Ben Cox. We pray that Ben will have some relief from his depression, but also some patience and understanding about your nature. We don't fully know your nature, and we don't understand how to help people who want instant answers all the time. But please give Michael and the people around Ben the words to say that will give him some comfort and some understanding and help him during this dark time, that he might find some hope that he can cling to that will help Ben get on the road to recovery. Father, we pray for Mark Wingfield, who hopefully will get some answers for what's been causing his pain for all this time, and perhaps get some relief from that. Hope that this doctor's visit goes well and that they're able to help Mark. We pray for Ryan, who is Nate's manager, as he's had cancer surgery and starting chemotherapy. Be with Ryan and his family and those who are treating him, that they might get Ryan back, his health back. We pray for Christy, the co-worker of Diana Early. We pray that her husband, who's in the hospital, and the two young children, and help her as she deals with all this, the pressure in her life. We thank you for Wilshire. We thank you for helping us to be your hands and feet in this part of the world. In the name we pray. Amen.
I'm Barbara Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Give us those other ones. There you go.
But it's so good to have you. Do you live here, Bob?
I live in, over by the lake.
Oh, okay. Well, come again.
Thank you so much.
How are you? I'm good. How are you? Had a great trip. I went to the whole
I do that. I do that every week. I'm like up really early and then I go to the sun. Get ready, yeah.
We even went to movie.
Yeah.
I agree with Summer.
Oh, wow.
It's just like we got our meeting this summer.
Because I was late.
Get on that, you know?
Yes. You were right.
Update, because I've been praying for him.
Oh, good, thank you so much.
So
I
I
mean,
will
it just,
continue to do so.
thank you.
Hi.
Where's Gay? Where's
He's around here somewhere.
Are you going to Luby's?
I don't know whether I will or not.
You do, you'll see me there.
They closed my Cafe Express. That's where they always went. It was in Mockingbird Station, a little lunch place. A lot of people from church would go there. And I eat lunch there, eat lunch there and work, so.
And we went through a whole list of impressions that they have. Including some chefs. When she was in Austin, she went to.
And again, and feel free to visit any other sites.
And he went to a seminar on hard to